Hi, I'm Rebecca. My wedding planner didn't say much, just leaned in and whispered, "Don't eat anything your sister brings." I laughed it off, but hours before my ceremony, my sister Vanessa arrived with a special cake, insisting I try a piece for good luck. By sunset, I was doubled over in pain. It wasn't food poisoning, it was sabotage. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. A calculated plan to ruin the most important day of my life. They almost succeeded, but my brother-in-law, a decorated army general I barely knew, had other plans. Now I have something they never expected. Not just my dignity, but justice. I hadn't spoken to Vanessa in nearly 8 months. Not because of some dramatic falling out or family feud. It was simpler than that. I was tired. Tired of competing for attention. Tired of her backhanded compliments. Tired of pretending I didn't notice how she'd roll her eyes whenever I shared good news. But when James proposed under the old oak tree at Riverdale Park, something in me softened. Maybe it was the way his hands trembled as he slid the ring on my finger. Maybe it was how the sunset painted everything gold that evening, making the world seem gentler than it was. Whatever the reason, I decided to extend an olive branch. "I'm getting married," I told her over the phone, my voice shakier than I'd planned. "I'd like you to be there." The silence lasted 3 beats too long before she answered. "Of course I'll be there, Becca. What kind of sister would I be if I missed your big day?" Something in her tone made my stomach tighten, but I pushed the feeling away. People change, I told myself. Maybe this was our chance to start over. The wedding was set for June at Willowbrook Estate, a restored Victorian mansion with gardens that bloomed like something from a fairy tale. Mom had always said I was the romantic one. Vanessa was the practical one, the successful one, the one who married strategically rather than for love. Her husband, Colonel Richard Davis, was rarely home, always deployed, always serving, always absent from family gatherings. I'd met him exactly twice in the 5 years they'd been married. He seemed nice enough, quiet, observant, with a posture so straight it looked painful. But there was something in his eyes when he looked at Vanessa. Not love, exactly. More like careful assessment. 3 weeks before the wedding, Jessica, my wedding planner, called me at an unusual hour. Just past midnight, her voice tight with restraint. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something, and I need you to not ask me how I know." I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. "What's wrong?" "Your sister came by the venue today. She was asking strange questions about the catering, about access to the kitchen, about the timeline for when food would be served and stored." "Maybe she's just being thorough?" I suggested, but even as I said it, doubt crept in. Jessica's voice dropped lower. "She asked if anyone checks what vendors bring in day of, if there's any kind of security. When I told her we have basic protocols, she seemed disappointed." My chest tightened. "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying be careful. Don't eat anything she brings. Don't let her near the food. I've worked over 200 weddings, and I've seen family drama turn ugly. But something about this feels different." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the ceiling until dawn painted my bedroom walls pink. Surely Jessica was overreacting. Vanessa could be difficult, competitive even. But sabotage? That seemed excessive, even for her. The morning of my wedding arrived with perfect blue skies and a gentle breeze, the kind of day brides dream about. My bridesmaids bustled around the bridal suite, champagne flowing, music playing softly in the background. Everything was on schedule, everything was beautiful, until Vanessa walked in carrying a small white box tied with silver ribbon. "Special delivery for the bride," she announced, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "A little tradition from Richard's family. The bride must eat a piece of good luck cake before walking down the aisle. Ensures a faithful husband." My best friend Charlotte shot me a look. She'd never trusted Vanessa, had warned me for years that my sister harbored resentments I couldn't see. "That's so thoughtful," I said carefully, "but I'm actually saving my appetite for the reception." Vanessa's smile faltered for just a second. "It's tradition, Becca. Richard would be offended if you refused. Besides, it's just a small piece." Handmade by his mother, she opened the box to reveal a beautiful mini cake, decorated with delicate sugar flowers and silver pearls. It looked exquisite. "His mother made this?" I asked, surprised. I'd never even met the woman. Vanessa nodded. "She sent the recipe. I baked it fresh this morning." The alarm bells that had been quietly ringing since Jessica's call now blared in my head. I glanced at my phone, saw the time, only 2 hours until the ceremony. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "It looks beautiful," I said, "but I'm actually feeling a little nervous. Maybe after the ceremony?" Vanessa's face hardened. "It has to be before. That's the whole point of the tradition." She cut a small piece, placed it on a napkin, and held it out to me. My bridesmaids had gone suspiciously quiet, watching the exchange. In that moment, I had a choice to make: refuse and risk a scene on my wedding day, or take a tiny bite to keep the peace and hope Jessica was wrong. "Just a small taste then," I said, breaking off the tiniest corner and bringing it to my lips. I pretended to eat it, discreetly wrapping it in my napkin when Vanessa turned to offer some to the bridesmaids. "No thank you," Charlotte said firmly. "I'm allergic to almonds." "There are no almonds in this," Vanessa replied too quickly. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "I didn't say there were. Just explaining why I'm declining." The tension in the room thickened. Vanessa's smile became brittle as she packed up the cake. "Well, the bride had some. That's what matters for the blessing." After she left, Charlotte turned to me. "Tell me you didn't actually eat that." I opened my napkin to show her the crumbled piece. I'm not that naive. But as it turned out, even touching it to my lips was enough. Within 30 minutes, my stomach began to cramp. By the time I should have been putting on my dress, I was hunched over in the bathroom, my body revolting against whatever had been in that cake. Charlotte pounded on the door. "Rebecca, are you okay? We need to start getting ready." "I think I'm sick," I managed to say, my voice echoing against the tile. She tried the handle, found it unlocked, and rushed in. One look at my face and she knew. "The cake," she whispered. "Even that tiny amount?" I nodded, unable to speak as another wave of nausea hit me. My vision blurred at the edges, dark spots dancing across the bathroom ceiling. "We need to call a doctor," Charlotte said, already pulling out her phone. "No," I gasped. "No hospitals. No postponements. She wants to ruin this day. I won't let her." Charlotte looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Rebecca, you can barely stand." "Help me up," I insisted. "Get me some water. And find Jessica. We need to secure all the food at the reception. Make sure Vanessa hasn't tampered with anything else." My mind raced even as my body rebelled. Why would she do this? What could she possibly gain from ruining my wedding day? The questions swirled as Charlotte helped me to the couch, as the makeup artist returned to find me pale and sweating, as the clock ticked closer to what should have been the happiest moment of my life. "I can't let her win," I whispered, more to myself than to Charlotte. Just then, a sharp knock came at the door. Charlotte opened it cautiously, blocking the entrance with her body. "Is Rebecca here?" a deep, unfamiliar male voice asked. "Who's asking?" Charlotte replied, protective as always. "Colonel Davis. Richard Davis. I need to speak with her immediately." I struggled to sit up. "Let him in." Colonel Richard Davis stepped into the bridal suite, still in his full dress uniform. He must have come directly from somewhere official. His face was stern, his posture rigid, but his eyes, they held something unexpected: concern. "You need to come with me," he said without preamble. "Now." Charlotte stepped between us. "She's not going anywhere. She's getting married in less than 2 hours. Not if she wants to live, she's not." His words fell like stones in the quiet room. He turned to me directly. "Did you eat anything Vanessa gave you today?" My blood ran cold. "Just..." touched it to my lips. "A cake." He closed his eyes briefly, something like pain crossing his features. "That's what I was afraid of. We need to get you to a doctor immediately." "Why?" Charlotte demanded. What was in it? Oleander, he replied grimly. Among other things. She's been experimenting. I found her notes. The room seemed to tilt. Oleander. Even I knew that was deadly. Why would she do this? I asked, my voice small. Richard's jaw tightened. Your grandmother's estate. The trust fund. It passes to you unless I die first, I finished, the realization dawning like ice water down my spine. But that's insane. It's not even that much money. Quote, It's not about the money, Richard said, helping me to my feet. It's about beating you. One final time. As he guided me toward the door, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Pale, shaking, still in my silk robe rather than my wedding dress. This wasn't how today was supposed to go. My wedding, I whispered. Richard paused. I've already spoken to your fiancé. He's meeting us at the hospital. The guests are being told there's been a slight delay due to a venue issue. You told James? Somehow that detail broke through my shock. I've been tracking Vanessa's behavior for months, Richard explained, his voice tight. I suspected she might try something like this, but I didn't have proof until this morning when I found her journal. I came as fast as I could. As we hurried down the back staircase to avoid being seen, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind. If you knew she was dangerous, why stay with her? Richard's expression darkened. Military intelligence doesn't just walk away when they identify a threat. They monitor it, contain it, learn from it. You're saying Vanessa is under investigation? I'm saying I married her 5 years ago as part of an assignment. Her first husband didn't die of natural causes, Rebecca. But we could never prove it. The world tilted again, reality rearranging itself around this new information. My sister, a black widow, a murderer, and her husband, an undercover operative sent to watch her. By the time we reached Richard's car, my legs could barely support me. Charlotte helped me into the back seat, climbing in beside me. The hospital is 8 minutes away, Richard said, pulling out of the venue's driveway with military precision. They're expecting us. I leaned my head against the cool window, watching Willowbrook Estate, my perfect wedding venue, recede in the distance. Inside, 200 guests would soon be arriving, unaware that the bride was fighting for her life. I need my phone, I said suddenly, turning to Charlotte. I need to document everything. She looked at me strangely. You need medical attention, not Instagram. Not for social media, I said, my thoughts clarifying despite the poison working through my system. For evidence. If she tried to kill me, I want proof. I want justice. Charlotte handed me my phone, concern etched across her features. As my fingers trembled over the screen, I created a new folder. Vanessa. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about making sure she never did this to anyone else. At the hospital, everything moved with urgent efficiency. Blood tests, activated charcoal IV fluids. James arrived minutes after us, his face pale with fear and rage. He held my hand through it all, even as doctors explained that I'd been fortunate. The minimal exposure meant I would recover, given time and treatment. The wedding, I whispered to him. Everyone we invited. Jessica is handling it, he assured me. She's telling everyone there was a water main break at the venue. We'll reschedule when you're better. I shook my head weakly. No, I don't want to wait. I don't want her to win. James exchanged a look with Richard, who stood by the door like a sentinel. She's in custody, Richard said. Local police picked her up at the venue 20 minutes ago. She was trying to tamper with the champagne for the toast. Relief and horror washed over me in equal measure. She really wanted me dead. She won't hurt anyone else, Richard promised. We have her journals, her search history, forensic evidence from her first husband's exhumation. It's over, Rebecca. But it didn't feel over. It felt like something had been stolen from me. Not just my wedding day, but my understanding of my own life, my own family. How had I never seen this darkness in her? As twilight fell outside my hospital window, I made a decision. I pulled myself up in the bed, ignoring the protest of my still recovering body. Get Jessica on the phone, I told James, and find out if the efficient is still at Willowbrook. He frowned. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we get married. Tonight. Right here. In the hospital? Charlotte asked, incredulous. I nodded. I refuse to let Vanessa take this day from us. if the mountain won't come to Muhammad. James smiled for the first time since arriving at the hospital. You're sure? I've never been more certain of anything, I said, and meant it. What followed was a flurry of activity that would have seemed comical under different circumstances. My wedding dress was retrieved from Willowbrook. The hospital chaplain was located and agreed to perform the ceremony. Our closest family members, minus Vanessa, of course, gathered in the hospital's small chapel. I was still weak, still processing the trauma of the day, but as James and I exchanged vows under the simple cross, something shifted inside me. This wasn't the wedding I'd planned, but in some ways it was more meaningful. We had faced our first crisis together and emerged stronger. Later, as I rested in my hospital bed wearing a wedding ring instead of an IV, Richard came to say goodbye. I owe you an explanation, he said, sitting stiffly in the visitor's chair. About Vanessa. You don't owe me anything, I told him. You saved my life. He shook his head. You should understand, your sister. She has a personality disorder, one that makes her incapable of genuine empathy. She sees people as either obstacles or tools. When we identified her as a suspect in her first husband's death, the department needed someone on the inside. I volunteered. So your entire marriage was a cover? An assignment, he corrected gently, one that became more complicated than anticipated. Vanessa is convincing. There were times I almost believed the person she pretended to be. I studied his face, saw the toll this deception had taken. What happens to her now? She'll stand trial. With the evidence we've gathered, she'll likely be institutionalized, perhaps with treatment. He didn't finish the thought. We both knew some breaks couldn't be repaired. And you? I asked. A small smile touched his lips. New assignment. Somewhere far away. Before he left, he handed me a flash drive. All the evidence, copies of her journals, the chemical analysis of the cake, everything. I thought you might want it. For closure. I accepted it, knowing I wasn't ready to look at it yet. Thank you. For everything. After he left, I sat in the dimming light of my hospital room, my new husband asleep in the chair beside me. Outside, stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. Not the honeymoon night I'd imagined, but I was alive. I was married to the man I loved. And I had learned a vital truth. Family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes the people who protect you, who stand by you in crisis, who help you rise when others try to bring you down, those are your real family. I reached for my phone and began to type, documenting everything while it was still fresh in my mind. Not just for evidence now, but for understanding. For healing. My sister poisoned my wedding cake, I wrote. Then my Army General brother-in-law arrived. This is what happened next. Sometimes the stories that shape us most aren't the ones with happy beginnings, but the ones where we find our strength in darkness, where we discover who truly stands beside us when everything falls apart. I may have lost a sister that day, but I gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I was stronger than anyone, even Vanessa, had ever given me credit for. Strong enough to survive, strong enough to rebuild, strong enough to forgive. Eventually, not for her sake but for my own. The life I would build with James wouldn't be shadowed by Vanessa's betrayal. It would be illuminated by the courage we found together on what should have been our darkest day. As sleep finally claimed me, one thought remained. This was just the beginning of our story, not the end. And I would be the one to write the next chapter. Do you have a family member who betrayed your trust? Did you find the strength to move forward? Or are you still struggling with the pain? Share your experience in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone is the first step toward healing. The next morning, I woke in my hospital room to find sunlight streaming through the blinds. For a moment, disorientation clouded my thoughts. This wasn't our honeymoon suite at the coastal resort we'd booked. Then reality crashed back. The poisoned cake, the emergency trip to the hospital, the impromptu wedding ceremony. I glanced down at the simple gold band on my finger and smiled despite everything. We were married. Vanessa hadn't taken that from us. James was asleep in the chair beside my bed, his suit jacket draped over him like a blanket, his tie loosened but still hanging around his neck. Even rumpled and exhausted, He looked handsome. More importantly, he looked loyal, the kind of person who stays when others would run. A nurse entered quietly, checking my vitals. "How are you feeling this morning, Mrs. Bennet?" she asked with a warm smile. Mrs. Bennet. The name still felt new, untested. "Better," I replied, and it was true. The nausea had subsided, and the trembling in my limbs had calmed. "When can I leave?" "Doctor wants to do one more round of tests, but if all looks good, you could be discharged by noon." James stirred at the sound of our voices, blinking away sleep. "Hey," he said, reaching for my hand, "you're looking more like yourself." "Amazing what not being poisoned can do for your complexion," I joked, but the humor fell flat. The reality of what had happened, what my own sister had tried to do, was still too raw. The nurse excused herself, promising to return with breakfast. Once we were alone, James moved to sit on the edge of my bed, his expression serious. "Richard came by earlier while you were sleeping. He left this for you." He handed me a thick manila envelope. "Said it might help you understand." I stared at the envelope, not sure I wanted to know what was inside. "Did you look at it?" James shook his head. "Not my place. But I'm here if you want to go through it together." Taking a deep breath, I opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of journal entries. Vanessa's handwriting, unmistakable with its precise, almost architectural slant. Pages of detailed notes about poisons, their symptoms, detection methods, calculations of dosages based on body weight, and, most chilling of all, a timeline with my name at the top. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. "She was planning this for months," I whispered. James's jaw tightened. "Richard said there's more. Financial records showing she'd already started transferring funds from your grandmother's estate. She must have had access somehow." "Grandmother made her a co-trustee," I said, remembering. "She always trusted Vanessa more with money matters. Said I was too soft-hearted." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Deeper in the stack, I found something unexpected: childhood photos. Vanessa and me at the beach, building sandcastles. At Christmas, unwrapping presents in matching pajamas. School pictures, birthday parties, family vacations. Moments that had felt genuine, loving. "I don't understand," I said, spreading the photos across the hospital blanket. "We were close once. What happened?" James picked up one of the photos. Vanessa and me as teenagers, arms thrown around each other's shoulders, laughing at some forgotten joke. Maybe Richard has insights he didn't share. Or maybe some darkness was always there, just waiting for the right trigger. I gathered the photos back into a pile, unable to reconcile the smiling girl with the woman who had meticulously planned my death. "I need to see her." James's head snapped up. "What? Why would you want to do that?" "Because otherwise I'll spend the rest of my life wondering why. I need to look her in the eye, just once, and ask her what I did that made her hate me enough to do this." "She's in custody, Rebecca." "You can't just walk into a jail." "Richard would know how to arrange it," I insisted. "I need this, James, for closure." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "If that's what you need, we'll find a way. But not today. Today we focus on getting you well enough to leave this hospital." By early afternoon, I was discharged with a clean bill of health and strict instructions to rest. Instead of heading to our planned honeymoon destination, we checked into a hotel near the courthouse where Vanessa was being held. James made calls to our families explaining the situation, to our jobs requesting extended leave, to the travel company rescheduling our trip. I sat on the hotel bed watching him handle everything with calm efficiency, grateful beyond words for his steadiness. When he finally set down his phone, I patted the space beside me. "I'm sorry our first day as husband and wife is being spent dealing with my homicidal sister," I said, trying for lightness and failing. James took my hand, his expression serious. "I didn't marry you for the easy days, Rebecca. I married you for all of it. The good, the bad, And apparently, the criminally insane relatives. That startled a genuine laugh from me, the first since this nightmare began. Quite the bargain you got. I think so, he said, kissing my forehead gently. Now, Richard texted, he's arranged for you to see Vanessa tomorrow morning if you're up to it. My stomach clenched at the thought, but I nodded. I need to do this. That night, I dreamed of childhood summers at our grandmother's lake house. Vanessa teaching me to swim, her hands firm but gentle under my back as I learned to float. I won't let you sink, she promised, her voice carrying across the water. Sisters don't let sisters drown. I woke with tears on my cheeks, James's arm wrapped protectively around my waist. Outside, the city was coming alive with morning traffic, sunlight creeping between the hotel curtains. Today, I would face my sister, not the one from my dreams, but the one who had tried to kill me on my wedding day. Richard was waiting in the hotel lobby when we came down, dressed in civilian clothes but still carrying himself with military bearing. "You're sure about this?" he asked without preamble. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "She doesn't know you're coming," he warned. I thought surprise might be better, less time for her to construct a performance. The drive to the detention center was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. James held my hand the entire way, his thumb tracing reassuring circles on my palm. When we arrived, Richard guided us through security with practiced ease. His military credentials opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed. The visitation room was stark. White walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs on opposite sides. I sat facing the door, James and Richard positioned behind me, out of immediate sight but close enough to intervene if needed. When the door opened and Vanessa was let in, handcuffed and wearing an orange jumpsuit, I almost didn't recognize her. Her normally perfect hair hung limp around her face. Without makeup, she looked older, harder, but her eyes, those were exactly the same. Cold, calculating, assessing. She stopped short when she saw me, genuine surprise flickering across her features before her mask of composure slid back into place. "Well," she said, her voice eerily calm. "This is unexpected. Shouldn't you be on your honeymoon?" "Hard to enjoy a honeymoon when you're recovering from being poisoned," I replied, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. The guard guided her to the chair across from me. 15 minutes, he said gruffly before stepping back to the door. Vanessa settled into the chair, arranging her handcuffed hands on the table with strange dignity. "You're looking well for someone who ingested oleander. I suppose I should have used more." Her casual admission sent a chill through me. "Why, Vanessa? What did I ever do to make you hate me this much?" She tilted her head, studying me like I was a mildly interesting specimen under a microscope. "Hate you? I don't hate you, Rebecca. I've simply never seen the point of you." "The point of me?" I echoed, confused. "You take up space, resources, attention, grandmother's affection, the estate, all wasted on someone who does nothing remarkable with any of it." She leaned forward slightly. "Do you know what I could do with those resources? The potential being squandered because you happened to be born 16 months after me?" I stared at her, trying to comprehend the coldness of her logic. "So this was about the inheritance? You tried to kill me for money?" "Not just money. Recognition. Position. What I deserve." Her eyes flickered to something behind me. Richard, I realized, though I see my husband has chosen his side. Disappointing, but not surprising. Military men are so boringly honorable. "He saved my life," I said. Vanessa's laugh was brittle. "Yes, my stalwart husband, the hero. Did he tell you he's been spying on me for years? That our entire marriage was a sham, designed to catch me in some imagined crime?" "Your first husband's death wasn't imagined," Richard said, stepping forward. "Neither was your attempt on Rebecca's life." "Alleged attempt," Vanessa corrected smoothly. "One sister bringing another a traditional pre-wedding cake. How was I to know it contained toxic substances? Perhaps it was sabotage from a jealous bridesmaid. Or a mix-up at the bakery." "We found your journals," I said quietly. "The detailed plans. The research on poisons. The timeline with my name on it." Something flickered in her eyes. Not remorse, but annoyance at being caught. Circumstantial. Creative writing exercises. You'll find my attorney quite skilled at alternative explanations. I leaned forward, holding her gaze. I didn't come here to debate legal strategies, Vanessa. I came to understand. We were close once. Don't you remember teaching me to swim at the lake? You promised you wouldn't let me drown. For just a moment, something like confusion crossed her face. That's not. I never taught you to swim. Mother did. The memory was so clear in my mind. Vanessa's hands supporting me in the water, her encouragement as I learned to float. Had I imagined it? Constructed a gentler history than what actually existed? It doesn't matter, I said finally. What matters is that you're my sister, and you tried to kill me. On my wedding day, I need to know if there was ever any real love between us, or if it was all just an act. Vanessa's expression hardened. Love is for greeting cards and people who lack ambition. I respected you. In my way. You were a worthy opponent. Quote, I wasn't competing with you, I whispered. That was your first mistake, she replied. Everyone is competing, Rebecca. Most are just too cowardly to admit it. The guard stepped forward. Time's up. I stood slowly, steadying myself against the table. Goodbye, Vanessa. I hope you find peace somehow. She laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Peace is for the dead. I prefer power. As the guard led her away, she turned back suddenly. I would have sent flowers to your funeral, you know. The most beautiful arrangement. People would have commented on my generosity and grief. The door closed behind her with a heavy metallic clang. I stood frozen, James's arm coming around my shoulders, anchoring me. Are you okay? He asked softly. I wasn't sure how to answer. The sister I thought I knew had never existed. The childhood memories I treasured were apparently fabrications. The family bond I had tried so hard to preserve had been nothing but a convenient facade for Vanessa. I will be, I said finally. Let's go home. Outside, the sun was painfully bright after the fluorescent lighting of the detention center. Richard walked us to our car, his expression troubled. There's something you should know, he said, hesitating, about Vanessa's condition. I looked at him expectantly. The psychological evaluation found evidence of antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features. It's a condition that's often present from childhood but worsens over time. You're saying she was born this way? James asked. Richard shook his head. Not exactly. Early trauma can trigger it, but it's complicated. The point is, she lacks the capacity for empathy that most people have. She can mimic it, pretend, but she doesn't feel it. So when I ask if she ever loved me, I began. She doesn't understand the question the way you mean it. Richard finished gently. To her, relationships are transactions. What can this person do for me? How can they advance my goals? I absorbed this, trying to reshape my understanding of our entire relationship through this new lens. Does that make it easier or harder to forgive her? Richard considered this. I don't know that forgiveness is the goal here, Rebecca. Understanding, maybe. Acceptance of what is rather than what you wished could be. His words stayed with me as we drove back to the hotel, as we packed our things, as we made the decision to continue with our planned honeymoon. Delayed by 2 days, but not denied. Vanessa had taken enough from me. I wouldn't let her take this too. On the flight to Bali, I leaned against James's shoulder, watching clouds drift beneath the wing. Do you think Richard is right? That some people are just wired differently, incapable of love? James was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. I think the capacity for empathy varies. Some people have it in abundance. They feel everything, sometimes too much. Others have to work at it. And maybe some, like Vanessa, lack it entirely. It makes me sad, I admitted, to think she's never experienced what we have. That's because you have the empathy she lacks, he said, kissing the top of my head. Even after everything, you still care about her well-being. That's who you are, Rebecca. Don't let her change that. Our villa in Bali was everything the brochure had promised. Private, secluded, with a plunge pool overlooking rice terraces that stretched to the horizon. Far from courtrooms and hospitals and painful family confrontations. Here, for 2 weeks, we could just be newlyweds, learning the rhythm of marriage without the shadow of betrayal hanging over us. On our third night, as we sat on our porch watching fireflies dance among the palms, James handed me a small wrapped package. "I've been saving this," he said, waiting for the right moment. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the cover embossed with my new initials. "For your new story," James explained. "The one that starts now." I ran my fingers over the smooth leather, emotion welling in my throat. "Our story?" "Our story," he agreed. "Not defined by what happened before, but by what we choose going forward." That night, I began to write. Not about Vanessa or the poisoning or the criminal case that would follow. Instead, I wrote about resilience. About finding strength in vulnerability. About building a family based on choice rather than blood. When we returned home 2 weeks later, tanned and rested, I had filled half the journal. The other half still waited. Blank pages for a future I was now eager to create. The legal proceedings moved forward without my direct involvement. Richard kept me updated. Vanessa had pled not guilty by reason of mental defect. Experts had been called. Evidence presented. The wheels of justice turned slowly but inexorably toward a conclusion I had already reached. My sister was dangerous, damaged, and needed to be somewhere she couldn't harm others. 6 months after my almost ruined wedding day, the verdict came down. Guilty, but mentally ill. Vanessa would serve her sentence in a psychiatric facility rather than prison, treatment rather than pure punishment. I found I was relieved. Not for her sake, but for my own peace of mind. "Does this give you closure?" my therapist asked during our weekly session. I had started therapy shortly after returning from our honeymoon, recognizing that some wounds needed professional help to heal properly. "I'm not sure closure is the right word," I replied honestly. "It's more like acceptance. I can't change what happened. I can't fix Vanessa. I can only decide how I let this experience shape me going forward." "And how is that?" she prompted. I thought about it, choosing my words carefully. "I'm more cautious now, but not fearful. More discerning about who I trust, but not closed off. I've learned that family can be dangerous, but also that family can be chosen." Richard had become an unexpected part of that chosen family. After completing his testimony in Vanessa's trial, he had been reassigned to a training position at a nearby military base. He came for dinner once a month, gradually shedding the stiffness that had characterized him during his years with Vanessa. Underneath, we discovered a thoughtful, even funny man who made dry observations about life that often left us laughing until tears came. "You know," he said during one such dinner, "in a twisted way, I should thank Vanessa. If she hadn't been a suspect, I never would have met either of you." "Silver linings in the strangest places," James agreed, raising his glass in a toast. On the anniversary of what should have been our original wedding day, James and I returned to Willowbrook Estate. Not to mourn what we had lost, but to reclaim the space. We walked the gardens hand in hand, stood beneath the arbor where we would have exchanged vows, and took photos to replace the ones we never got. "Next year," James said as we drove away, "we'll have a vow renewal here, the wedding we should have had." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "I don't know. Our hospital wedding had a certain charm. Nothing says, in sickness and in health, quite like actually being in a hospital." He laughed. "Fair point, but you deserve the fairy tale too." "I have the fairy tale," I said softly. "Just not the one I expected." As we drove home through the golden late afternoon light, I thought about the journal James had given me in Bali. I had filled it completely now, the last page finished just that morning. Tomorrow I would start a new one. A continuation rather than a conclusion. That's the thing about surviving betrayal. It doesn't end with justice or understanding or even forgiveness. It continues in how you choose to live afterward, in the boundaries you set, the love you accept, the person you decide to become. My sister poisoned my wedding cake. Then my Army General brother-in-law arrived and saved my life. But that's not where the story ends. It's where it truly begins. 2 years after the wedding that almost killed me, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. Outside, spring painted the world in delicate pinks and greens. a perfect backdrop for the event we'd planned. Not a vow renewal, as James had once suggested, but something different. Something healing. "You almost ready?" James called from the bedroom. "The caterers just arrived." "Almost," I replied, taking a final look at my reflection. The woman staring back bore little resemblance to the bride who had once touched poisoned cake to her lips. My eyes were clearer now, my stance more confident. Surviving betrayal had changed me in ways both subtle and profound. I stepped into our bedroom where James waited, handsome in a navy suit. "You look beautiful," he said, taking my hands in his. "How are you feeling about today?" "Nervous," I admitted, "but ready." Today we were hosting what we called a second chance celebration, gathering friends and family who had supported us through the darkest chapter of our lives, along with others who had survived their own personal traumas. A day to acknowledge pain, but focus on resilience. To create something meaningful from what had once been broken. The idea had come to me 6 months earlier, after I'd started volunteering at a support group for survivors of family betrayal. Listening to others share stories similar to mine, siblings who had stolen inheritances, parents who had abandoned responsibilities, relatives who had caused deliberate harm, I realized how common yet isolating such experiences could be. "You're not alone in this," I told a young woman who had discovered her brother embezzling from their family business. "And you're not defined by what happened to you." The words had flowed naturally, but as I spoke them, I realized I was finally beginning to believe them for myself as well. Downstairs, our home had been transformed. White lilies and blue hydrangeas adorned every surface. Caterers arranged delicate appetizers on silver trays. A string quartet tuned their instruments in the corner of our living room. Through the French doors, I could see our backyard set up with round tables and twinkling lights strung between the trees. "Richard's here," James said, glancing out the window as a car pulled into our driveway. I smiled. "With his date?" "Looks like it." Richard's gradual return to dating had been a source of gentle teasing between us. After years in a sham marriage with Vanessa, he had been understandably hesitant to try again. But 6 months ago, he'd met Claire, a literature professor at the local university, and something had shifted. He smiled more, laughed more easily, showed up with books he thought I might enjoy, recommended by Claire. "I'll go greet them," I said, squeezing James's hand before heading downstairs. Richard stood in our entryway, still military, straight in his posture, but softer somehow in a charcoal suit rather than his uniform. Beside him, Claire beamed, her silver-streaked hair elegantly swept up, a bouquet of sunflowers in her arms. "These are for you," she said, handing me the bright blooms. "Richard told me they're your favorite." I accepted them with genuine pleasure. "They are? Thank you for remembering," I said to Richard. He shrugged, almost sheepish. "I pay attention." "That he does," Claire agreed, slipping her arm through his. "Sometimes I think he notices things about me that I haven't even realized about myself." Their easy affection warmed me. From such darkness, light had somehow emerged. Richard, once trapped in a marriage built on deception, now experiencing what appeared to be genuine connection. And me, once betrayed by blood, now surrounded by the family I had chosen. Guests began to arrive. Charlotte and her husband, Jessica, the wedding planner who had become a dear friend, colleagues from work, members from my support group, even Dr. Simmons who had treated me in the emergency room that fateful day. Each arrival felt like another stitch in the fabric of healing that had been slowly weaving itself over the past 2 years. As I moved through our home, greeting people, accepting hugs and well wishes, I caught sight of a familiar face I hadn't expected. Dr. Helen Morris, the lead psychiatrist from the facility where Vanessa was serving her sentence. "I hope it's all right that I came," she said when I approached her. "Your invitation said, all who have been part of our journey, and in an unusual way. You absolutely belong here," I assured her, guiding her toward a quiet corner where we could speak privately. "How is she?" Dr. Morris's expression was carefully neutral. "There are confidentiality limits to what I can share, of course, but I can tell you she's participating in her treatment program. Whether there's genuine progress or just compliance is difficult to determine with someone like your sister." I nodded, having expected as much. "Has she ever asked about me?" A slight hesitation. Not directly, but she keeps the newspaper clipping about your foundation in her room. This surprised me. 6 months ago, James and I had established the Phoenix Trust, a nonprofit dedicated to helping survivors of family trauma rebuild their lives. The local paper had run a small feature which I'd never imagined would reach Vanessa. "What do you make of that?" I asked. Dr. Morris considered her answer carefully. "With personality disorders like your sister's, traditional emotional connections are difficult. But recognition, being seen, these matter deeply. Your success, your ability to create meaning from what she did to you, it registers with her, even if not in the way it would for most people." I absorbed this, uncertain how it made me feel. Will she ever be released? That depends on many factors. Her condition isn't curable in the traditional sense. But with proper treatment, some patients can learn to manage their behaviors. It would be years, at minimum, and would require extensive evaluation. The thought of Vanessa free again sent a chill through me, but I pushed it aside. Today wasn't about fear, it was about reclamation. "Thank you for coming," I said sincerely. "And for the work you do. It can't be easy." Dr. Morris smiled slightly. "No harder than what you've done, facing betrayal and choosing to grow from it rather than be diminished by it." Quote. James appeared at my side, sensing perhaps that I needed support. "Everything okay?" I nodded, introducing him to Dr. Morris. Their conversation drifted to the foundation, giving me a moment to collect my thoughts. Across the room, I watched our guests interacting, strangers becoming connections, survivors sharing stories, laughter rising above the music. This was why we had created today's event. Not to forget what had happened, but to demonstrate that darkness could be transformed. That broken trust could lead to new beginnings. At 7 o'clock, James clinked his glass for attention. The room quieted as guests found seats or standing positions around our living room. I moved to James's side, taking the microphone he offered. "Thank you all for being here," I began, looking out at the faces of those who had walked alongside us. 2 years ago, as many of you know, I experienced what should have been the worst day of my life. My sister poisoned my wedding cake. She tried to take everything from me. My future, my happiness, my very life. A hush fell over the room. Some knew the full story, others only pieces. But all understood the weight of what I was sharing. I spent months asking why, questioning what I had done to deserve such betrayal, wondering if I would ever feel safe or whole again. I paused, gathering my emotions. What I discovered is that there are some questions that have no satisfying answers, some betrayals that can never be fully understood. James's hand found mine, a silent encouragement to continue. But I also discovered something else, that survival isn't just about enduring. It's about choosing how you carry what happened to you. It's about deciding that your worst day doesn't get to define all your days that follow. Across the room, I saw Charlotte wipe away a tear. Richard stood straighter, his expression a mixture of pride and something deeper, more complex. That's why we created the Phoenix Trust, and why we've gathered you all here today. Because every person in this room has faced darkness, in some form. Every one of us has been tested by life in ways we never asked for or deserved. I gestured to the tables visible through the French doors, the twinkling lights now glowing softly in the early evening. Outside, you'll find something unusual on your tables: cards and pens. We're asking each of you to write down something you once lost: trust, security, confidence, whatever it might be. And then, on the other side, write what you've gained or created in its place. Murmurs of interest rippled through the crowd. Later tonight, we'll release these cards together. Not to forget what happened, but to acknowledge our power to transform it. To recognize that while we can't choose what happens to us, we can choose what we build from the rubble. James stepped forward, adding his voice to mine. "Before we move outside for dinner, Rebecca and I have an announcement." He looked at me, eyes asking a silent question. I nodded, ready. "This fall, we'll be welcoming a new addition to our family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Our daughter." Applause erupted, guests surging forward with congratulations. Amid the excitement, few noticed my careful wording. "Not pregnant, Not adoption. Exactly. Something else. Later, as guests mingled in the backyard, enjoying dinner under the stars, Richard found me by the fountain that had been my grandmother's pride and joy. You didn't tell them the full story, he observed. I smiled slightly. They don't need all the details yet, just the heart of it. What we hadn't shared was that our daughter-to-be was Lily, the 8-year-old child of Vanessa's first husband, the one who had died under suspicious circumstances. After an extensive investigation had revealed Vanessa's role in his death, Lily had been placed with her paternal grandparents, who were now in their 70s and struggling with health issues. It had been Richard who connected the dots, who discovered that the little girl had no other family to care for her if something happened to her grandparents. Richard, who had approached us delicately with the situation, uncertain how I would feel about raising the child of my sister's victim. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked now, his voice gentle. "Taking in Lily is a beautiful thing, but it also means Vanessa will always be connected to your life in some way." I watched the party, the joy evident in every interaction, the healing that had taken place over 2 years of intentional growth. I'm sure Lily deserves a family who will love her, protect her, and help her understand her own story when she's ready. Who better than people who truly understand what she's lost? Richard nodded slowly. "You've come a long way from that hospital room." "We all have," I replied, thinking of how different our lives had been 2 years ago. Richard trapped in a sham marriage. Me, Ian, nearly killed by my own sister. James thrust into a family drama he never asked for. And now here we stood, scarred but stronger, creating new connections from broken ones. "Have you told Dr. Morris about Lily?" he asked. "Not yet. I'm not sure if or when that information should reach Vanessa." The thought of my sister learning that I would raise the child of the man she had murdered was complicated. Would it seem like the ultimate victory to her, or the ultimate defeat? "One bridge at a time," Richard agreed. As the evening progressed, our celebration took on a ceremonial quality. Guests completed their cards, sharing quietly with each other what they had written. When the time came, we gathered in a circle in the garden, each holding a small paper lantern with our card attached. "As we release these lanterns," I said, "we acknowledge both what was taken from us and what we've created in its place. We honor our losses without being defined by them. We celebrate our capacity to rebuild, to transform, to rise." One by one, lanterns were lit and released, drifting upward into the night sky like earthbound stars seeking their place in the cosmos. I watched mine ascend, carrying words I had carefully chosen. Lost, the sister I thought I had. Gained, the family I chose to build. James's lantern rose beside mine, our lights dancing together as they climbed higher. Nearby, Richard and Claire released theirs simultaneously, their hands finding each other's as they watched the glow recede. Charlotte approached me, her eyes still damp from emotion. "This was beautiful, Rebecca, truly healing." "That was the hope," I said, embracing her. "To create something meaningful from something terrible." As the last guests departed around midnight, James and I stood in our doorway, arms wrapped around each other, watching taillights disappear down our driveway. "Successful night?" he asked, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Beyond what I imagined," I admitted. "Did you see Morgan from my support group talking with Dr. Abrams about starting a similar program at the community center? Or how Richard and Claire connected with Lily's grandparents?" James smiled. "I did. Connections forming everywhere. New beginnings." We cleaned up together, moving in the easy rhythm we'd developed over our years together. As I gathered leftover flowers to donate to the local nursing home tomorrow, I found the card Dr. Morris had left on our gift table. Inside was a simple note. "In my work, I see the worst of what humans can do to each other. Tonight, I witness the best of what can emerge from that darkness. Thank you for reminding me why this work matters." I showed it to James, something expanding in my chest. Not quite happiness, but something deeper. Purpose, perhaps. Meaning extracted from pain. In bed that night, James's hand rested gently on my stomach, though there was no physical pregnancy to acknowledge. The gesture was symbolic, an acknowledgement of the family we were creating, the future we were building. "Are you nervous?" he asked quietly. "About Lily coming to live with us?" I considered the question honestly. Yes, she's experienced such trauma already. What if we can't give her what she needs? We've both learned a lot about healing, he reminded me. And we have an entire community supporting us. He was right. The path forward wouldn't be simple or straight, but we wouldn't walk it alone. Richard had already volunteered to help Lily understand her father's military service. Charlotte had connections with child psychologists specializing in trauma. Our foundation had resources for families like ours. "We'll take it one day at a time," I said, settling against his shoulder. "Just like we have with everything else." As sleep began to claim me, I found myself thinking not of Vanessa or the poison or the betrayal, but of Lily, a child I had yet to meet but already felt connected to. Perhaps that was the ultimate transformation. From destruction to creation, from endings to beginnings. My sister had poisoned my wedding cake, intending to destroy everything I loved. Instead, her actions had set in motion a series of events that would bring a child into our home who needed exactly what we could give: understanding, protection, and the knowledge that family is about more than blood. It's about choice, commitment, love that persists even when tested by fire. In the darkness, I smiled. There was justice in this outcome that no court could have orchestrated. A healing that no therapy alone could have provided. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Preparations for Lily's arrival. Another meeting with her grandparents. The ongoing work of our foundation. The never-ending process of building a life that honored both what we had lost and what we had gained. But tonight, surrounded by the lingering energy of celebration and connection, I felt something I had once thought impossible in the aftermath of such betrayal. Peace. Not the absence of pain or the forgetting of what had happened, but a deeper acceptance. A recognition that my story, our story, wasn't defined by its worst chapter. We were writing new pages now. Better ones. Filled with purpose and possibility, and the profound understanding that sometimes our deepest wounds become the source of our greatest gifts to the world. 5 years after the day my sister tried to poison me, I stood in the doorway of our sunlit kitchen watching Lily frost cupcakes for her 13th birthday party. Her tongue poked out slightly as she concentrated, carefully piping blue icing onto each cake with the precision of a surgeon. James leaned against the counter beside her, sneaking glances of admiration at their daughter's handiwork. Our daughter now, in every way that mattered. The adoption had been finalized 3 years ago, with her grandparents' blessing. They remained a loving presence in her life but had acknowledged that raising a teenager was beyond their physical capabilities. The transition had been smoother than any of us dared hope, as if Lily had been waiting for a place to truly belong. "Mom, come look," she called, sensing my presence without turning around. "I made one special for you." I crossed the kitchen, wrapping an arm around her slender shoulders. The cupcake she'd set aside had a tiny fondant phoenix rising from sugary blue flames. "Our symbol. Our story." "It's beautiful, Lily," I said, kissing the top of her head. "Uncle Richard taught me how to make the phoenix," she explained, beaming with pride. "He said it's important to remember we can rise from anything." Uncle Richard. The title still made me smile. He and Claire had married 2 years ago in a small ceremony in her family's garden. They had no children of their own. Claire was past childbearing age, and Richard claimed he had enough gray hair without adding teenagers to the mix. But they had embraced the role of honorary aunt and uncle to Lily with wholehearted devotion. "Speaking of Uncle Richard," James said, checking his watch, "they should be here soon. The party starts in an hour." Lily nodded, adding final touches to the last cupcake. "Is Grandma Jean coming too?" "Of course," I assured her. "She wouldn't miss your birthday for anything." Jean was Lily's paternal grandmother, a soft-spoken woman with steel in her spine. The first time we'd met to discuss Lily's future, I had been terrified she would resent me, the sister of the woman who had killed her son. Instead, she had taken my hands in hers and said simply, "You're nothing like her." I can see that clearly. Those words had been a lifeline when doubt crept in during difficult moments of parenting a traumatized child. "You're nothing like her," a mantra that carried me through nights when Lily woke screaming from nightmares she couldn't articulate. Through days when she tested boundaries, half expecting us to abandon her as others had. Through conversations about her father, her history, and yes, eventually, about Vanessa. We had waited until Lily was 11 before telling her the full story, not out of deception but out of care, ensuring she had the emotional foundation to process such difficult truths. Richard had been present for that conversation, providing the factual context while James and I offered the emotional support. Lily had listened in silence, then asked the one question we hadn't prepared for. "Can I write to her?" The memory of that moment still tightened my chest. My first instinct had been an immediate, protective no. But watching Lily's face, serious, determined, so much older than her years, I had recognized something essential. Her need to make sense of her own story, just as I had needed to make sense of mine. With careful boundaries established by Dr. Morris, Lily had exchanged 3 letters with Vanessa over the past 2 years, supervised, redacted when necessary, but genuine in their attempt to connect across a chasm of trauma and time. I never read them. That was Lily's private journey, but Dr. Morris assured me that my sister's responses showed no manipulation, just a strange, distant curiosity about the child now being raised by the woman she had tried to kill. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my reflections. Lily raced to answer it, her earlier concentration replaced by birthday excitement. Richard and Claire stood on our porch, arms laden with wrapped packages and a bouquet of sunflowers, our tradition now, at every celebration. "There's the birthday girl," Richard said, his formal military bearing softening as Lily threw her arms around him. 13. When did you get so grown up?" Claire handed me the sunflowers with a warm smile. "The garden's overflowing this year. I've been thinking of bringing some to the Foundation's new counseling center. Add some color to those rooms." "They'd love that," I said, ushering them inside. "The renovations are finally finished. We open officially next month." The Phoenix Trust had expanded beyond our wildest expectations. What had begun as a small support group had grown into a full-fledged nonprofit, with 3 locations across the state, offering counseling, legal advocacy, and practical support for survivors of family trauma. James had left his corporate job 2 years ago to manage the operational side, while I divided my time between direct client work and speaking engagements, sharing our story to raise awareness and funds. As more guests arrived, Charlotte and her husband with their twin toddlers, Jessica and her new fiancé, colleagues from the Foundation, Lily's friends from school and their parents. Our home, filled with the kind of joyful chaos I had once feared, might never be possible again. Laughter echoed through rooms that had once held only questions and pain. Jean arrived last, moving slower now but still elegant in her pressed slacks and cardigan. She carried a small, worn leather case that immediately caught Lily's attention. "Is that?" Lily began, hope lighting her features. Jean nodded. "Your father's medals." "I thought it was time you had them." The room quieted as Jean opened the case, revealing the military honors Lily's father had earned before his death. Richard stepped forward, explaining each one with reverent precision: service medals, commendations, symbols of a life dedicated to something greater than himself. "He was a good man," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion, "one of the best I served with. He would be so proud of the young woman you're becoming, Lily." Lily touched the medals gently, connecting with a father she had barely known. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to my eyes, she turned to James. "Would you help me find a special place for these in my room, Dad?" "Dad?" The word had come naturally to her, about a year after she moved in. Not replacing her birth father, but acknowledging the man who had stepped up to love her as his own. James's eyes shimmered as he nodded, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. The party continued around them as they slipped upstairs to find the perfect spot for this precious inheritance. I caught Richard watching them go, a complex emotion crossing his features. "You did the right thing," I said quietly, joining him by the window. Bringing her into our family. It wasn't easy, but it was right. He nodded slowly. There's a certain symmetry to it all, a balance restored. Is that the military strategist talking? I teased gently. His smile was thoughtful. Maybe. Or maybe just a man who's seen enough darkness to recognize true light when he finds it. The conversation shifted as Claire joined us, bringing plates of Lily's cupcakes. But Richard's words lingered with me. A balance restored. Not through vengeance or punishment, but through love and deliberate choice. Through the decision to create something new from what had been broken. Later that evening, after guests had departed and Lily had gone upstairs to arrange her new treasures, I found myself alone in the kitchen with James, washing dishes side by side as we had done countless times over our years together. "Good day?" he asked, bumping my hip gently with his. "The best," I agreed. "Did you see Lily's face when Jean gave her those medals?" He nodded, passing me a glass to dry. That moment alone made every difficult day worth it. And there had been difficult days. Days when Lily's trauma surfaced in angry outbursts or fearful withdrawal. Days when the responsibility of helping her heal, while protecting her from further harm, seemed overwhelming. Days when my own memories of betrayal rose unexpectedly, triggered by a phrase or gesture that echoed Vanessa. "I got a call from Dr. Morris yesterday," I said, setting down the dish towel. "I haven't had a chance to tell you yet." James turned off the water, giving me his full attention. "About Vanessa?" I nodded. "She's being transferred to a lower security facility next month. Good behavior, apparently. Consistent participation in her treatment program. How do you feel about that?" It was a complex question. 5 years had created distance from the acute pain of betrayal, but some wounds leave permanent scars. "Cautious," I said finally. "Dr. Morris believes the progress is genuine, but it's Vanessa," James finished for me. "Exactly." I leaned against the counter, organizing my thoughts. "Dr. Morris mentioned something else. Vanessa has asked if I would consider visiting. Not immediately, but eventually." James was quiet for a moment, processing this unexpected development. "And will you?" "I don't know," I admitted. 5 years ago, my answer would have been an immediate no now. I'm not sure what purpose it would serve. For her or for me. "You don't owe her anything," he reminded me gently. "Not closure, not forgiveness, not understanding." I know. And I did know. Had learned that lesson through years of therapy and growth. But I'm curious about what she wants to say after all this time. James dried his hands, then took mine. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Just promise you'll think about it carefully. Consider what it might stir up, for you and for Lily." I squeezed his hands, grateful beyond words for his steady presence. "I promise. No rush to decide." Upstairs, we found Lily in her room, arranging her father's medals on a small shelf beside her bed. She had created a miniature memorial. The medals, a photograph Jean had given her, a small American flag in a stand. "It looks perfect," I said from the doorway. She turned, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about something." "What's that, sweetheart?" James asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "About family. About how it's not just who you're born to, but who chooses you." She gestured to the medals. "My first dad didn't get to choose to stay with me. But you two chose to become my parents. Uncle Richard chose to help find me. Everyone chose to make a family that didn't exist before." Her insight caught me by surprise, the wisdom in her young voice, the clarity with which she saw our unconventional family structure. "That's exactly right," I said, sitting beside her. "Family is about choice, commitment, showing up for each other, especially when it's difficult." Lily nodded seriously. "That's why I write to her sometimes. To understand her choices. To make sure I don't make the same ones." A chill ran through me at the unexpected mention of Vanessa. "You know you're nothing like her, right? The capacity for harm that exists in your birth aunt isn't part of who you are. I know, she said simply. But I still want to understand. Like you did when you went to see her in jail that time. James and I exchanged glances over her head. We had always been honest with Lily about our history, tailoring details to her age and emotional readiness. She knew I had confronted Vanessa once, seeking answers that never fully came. Understanding can be important, I acknowledged, but so are boundaries, protection, self-care. That's what I'm learning in therapy, she agreed. Balance. There it was again, Richard's word. Balance. The delicate equilibrium between acknowledging pain and moving beyond it. Between honoring the past and creating the future. Between remembering and healing. After tucking Lily in and saying goodnight, James and I retreated to our bedroom. Through the window, stars punctuated the darkness, reminiscent of the lanterns we had released at our celebration years ago, carrying both loss and renewal into the night sky. She's remarkable, James said, sitting on our bed, wiser than I was at twice her age. She's had to be, I replied, a familiar ache blooming in my chest for all Lily had endured. But she's also just a kid. A teenager now, God help us. He laughed softly. I'm prepared for slam doors and dramatic sighs. After everything else, normal teenage rebellion will be a welcome challenge. I joined him on the bed, resting my head on his shoulder. Do you ever wonder how different our lives would be if Vanessa hadn't done what she did? If our wedding had gone as planned? Sometimes, he admitted. But then I look at what we've built. Our family, the foundation, the lives we've helped change. And I can't imagine a different path now. He was right. The trajectory of our lives had been irrevocably altered by betrayal, but what had emerged wasn't just survival, it was purpose, meaning, a deeper understanding of both human darkness and resilience than we might otherwise have achieved. The next morning, I rose early, drawn to my home office while the house was still quiet. On my desk sat a stack of letters, messages from people who had attended our speaking events, sharing how our story had impacted their own journeys through betrayal and healing. I opened the top envelope, written in careful, shaky handwriting. Dear Rebecca, I never thought I would find hope again after what my brother did to me. The theft was bad enough, but the lies he told the family to cover it up nearly destroyed me. For 2 years I've been stuck in anger, unable to move forward. Then I heard you speak at the community center. You said something that changed everything for me. Your worst day doesn't get to define all your days that follow. I've written this on my bathroom mirror. I read it every morning. Last week, I started volunteering at a financial literacy program for seniors, helping others avoid the kind of exploitation I experienced. For the first time since everything happened, I feel like I'm creating something meaningful from my pain. Thank you for showing me it's possible to build a beautiful life, even after betrayal. Tears blurred my vision as I set the letter aside. This was why we shared our story. Why we had chosen to transform private pain into public purpose. Not to dwell in trauma, but to illuminate paths forward for others still finding their way through darkness. I pulled out my journal, the 10th or 11th since James had given me that first leather-bound book in Bali. On a fresh page, I began to write, as I did every morning. Today marks 5 years since my sister poisoned my wedding cake. 5 years since my brother-in-law arrived in time to save my life. 5 years of rebuilding, transforming, and creating meaning from what was meant to destroy me. I am not the woman I was then. I am stronger, wiser, more intentional in how I love and who I trust. The betrayal taught me to set boundaries, but it didn't teach me to stop opening my heart. That choice, to remain open despite risk, has been my greatest victory. Our family looks nothing like what I imagined on the morning of my wedding day. It is bigger, more complex, woven together by choice rather than solely by blood. It includes a daughter who brings us immeasurable joy, friends who became family when we needed them most, and connections with people whose lives have been touched by our foundation. I don't know if I will ever visit Vanessa. I don't know if true reconciliation is possible with someone whose capacity for empathy is so fundamentally different from my own. But I do know this. Her actions no longer have power over my happiness. The poison she intended to end my life instead catalyzed a richer, more purposeful existence than I might otherwise have known. There is a phrase Lily learned in her therapy group, post-traumatic growth. The idea that some people don't just recover from trauma but actually develop new strengths, insights, and possibilities because of what they endured. This has been true for us, not because the trauma was good, it wasn't, but because we refused to let it be the end of our story. Today, I am grateful, not for what happened, but for who we've become, because of how we chose to respond. For the family we've built from broken pieces. For the purpose we've found in helping others navigate their own darkest days. My sister poisoned my wedding cake. My brother-in-law arrived in time to save my life. But that was just the beginning of a story that continues to unfold in ways I never could have imagined. A story of resilience, purpose, and the remarkable capacity of the human spirit to create beauty from ashes. I closed the journal as the sound of footsteps on the stairs signaled the house awakening. Lily appeared in the doorway, still in pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "Morning, Mom," she said through a yawn. "Dad says we should make pancakes. Birthday tradition continues." "Sounds perfect," I smiled, rising to join her. As we headed toward the kitchen, Lily slipped her hand into mine, a gesture becoming rarer as she grew older, more independent. I savored the warmth of her palm against mine, the simple trust in the connection. "Mom?" she asked as we reached the bottom of the stairs. "Are you happy? Like, really happy?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. I looked at my daughter, this remarkable child who had come into our lives through such a tangled path of loss and love, and found the answer required no thought at all. "Yes," I said, squeezing her hand. "I am really, truly happy, not because life is perfect or easy, but because it's meaningful, because we've built something beautiful together." She nodded, seemingly satisfied. "That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure." In the kitchen, James was already gathering ingredients, morning sunlight streaming through windows we had expanded during renovations 3 years ago. The house, like our lives, had been transformed, opened up, brightened, made more spacious to accommodate the family we had become. As I watched Lily measure flour with scientific precision while James prepared fresh berries, a profound sense of rightness settled over me. This was not the life I had planned. It was better, deeper, more authentic, built on a foundation of intentional choices rather than assumptions. My sister had poisoned my wedding cake, thinking it would be the end of my story. Instead, it had been just the beginning, the first chapter in a narrative far more powerful than either of us could have imagined. A story not of victimhood, but of transformation. Not of what was taken, but of what was built in its place. And that, perhaps, was the most meaningful justice of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.